Somebody just kindly patted me on the back and said, thanks for that. Follow that. And you kind of want to look round, don't you, You get really paranoid. Say, does my bum look big in this? But I'm not supposed to use that language either. Don't be an arse. I think the issue is that represents, for me, the power of the profession. Not only looking good in a kind of onesie, not only looking good with B, G and T on the derriere, but that kind of sense of liberating dreams, liberating potential. And I'm just so sad that you look so good in shorts as well. It really irritates me on Twitter that you look so good. But in real life, it's a shock, Dave. I think you're gorgeous. As a fellow northerner, if I can say that to you, yeah. Oh, it's a boy crush. Oh, stop. It's not you. It's not just you and Jackson. God. I want to talk about policy. That's a really good thing to talk about now. Thanks for that setup. So how does this work? Do we press the green? What struck me throughout today was a phrase. You might know the quote. It's from somebody that wrote quite a few things, and they talked about the best of times and the worst of times. And I've got a sense that right from this morning, that duality, that kind of sense that we've gone through absolute tragedy, and it could be personal, and it could be professional, and as Dave has said, it could be about a community. I think you're right. I think the cost of living crisis has just started, and I think the autumn is going to put all sorts of pressure on families, communities, and schools. And we need to stick together. And I think, if anything that I've taken from today, and it's been absolutely fantastic, and can we give a massive round of applause for all LGfL staff who have helped organise this fantastic event. I'm very lucky. I got 3.5 weeks' notice. I mean, that extra few days, it's such a privilege. Yeah, I'll put my shorts on in a minute. But a kind of sense that what we've gone through, and I tried to write this about a year ago, and I don't think we've had enough time to reflect about that tragedy. Some of it is going to be an ongoing tragedy, but also the absolute and utter triumph of the profession. And what interested me during those 2 years was the kind of sense that, I don't know about you, I had so many head in the hands moments. I don't know what was the most ridiculous head in the hand moment, but let me try this for you. A Department for Education taking a school to court who didn't want to actually go into school because they were afraid of coronavirus. That was it not, the most ridiculous moment. And then 2 days later, guess what? Schools were closed. You remember that? Do people remember that? And then I also remember not just those head in the hands moments, but also those moments of absolute and utter celebration for the magnificence of the NHS, public service workers, and the teachers that I was working with. It was the best of times and the worst of times. And Dickens had it right when he talked about the duality. And that's what we've experienced, that duality, that sense of hope, that sense of optimism. Those schools stayed open. Those schools protected learning. And within days, online systems had been established. Teachers that had never had experience of digital or a little bit suspicious of digital were adopting new techniques, adopting new ways to reach pupils, to talk with, to involve, to socialize, to educate pupils. It's really important to remember. Because you know what happens in your lives. That's gone now. It's gone. We're on to a new thing. Next challenge. We can't afford to have a profession forgetting what it did. And it was my absolute privilege and honour to work with LGfL. And I want to say not only thank you for this event, but also thank you for when we worked together on the Department for Education's EdTech demonstrator project. Within days, we'd established a field force of human beings to match schools that wanted help with schools, they were called demonstrators, to demonstrate EdTech in an emergency response that reached thousands of schools and touched millions of pupil hours. Truly, we took schools, and some of them here, some of the EdTech demonstrators are in this room. We took schools that had very little experience, weren't even aware of some of the tools that they already had, or had no platforms. We had them set up, and within weeks, they were doing the business. Within days, they were doing the business. And Dave, you must also be utterly proud, not only of what you did as a school, but your community and the fact that I think we rediscovered, did we not? You know, when we were outside on our step in Brighton, tapping with surreal moments, weren't they? With a wooden spoon. I mean, you had to look at yourself sometimes and think, I'm actually out on my front step with a pan, hitting it with a wooden spoon. I mean, triumph, tragedy. And so what we wanted to do and what we wanted to capture was the absolute sense that this sector, and that's why we publish and celebrate in the EdTech 50, this sector is now, I think, firmly established. I think also what we began to think about when we published Protecting Learning, and we've heard it today, it's the humans that make it work. Culture, it's a quote, culture eats technology for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The culture of the leader, in a onesie or in shorts, it doesn't matter, but the culture that that leader sets, the culture that that leader leads, the culture that you as teachers lead in your classroom, that makes the difference. That's the triumph. That's why triumph and hope and optimism will win out. It will win out over a politics that I felt during these last 2 years lacked care, lacked empathy, and actually lacked any sense of what was going on in those schools. It was a disconnect. You've heard the phrase, a disconnect between politics and people. For me, it wasn't just a disconnect, it was a chasm. And when we published Protecting Learning, we put into the public domain this idea. And it was a very tough idea, and I'm not sure we got it fully right. I'm not sure that we can fully prove it, but there was a sense that schools who were digitally rich, who had digital capabilities, and they take a while. None of this is overnight, even though EdTech adoption and use, we've never seen it before at speed in terms of what we saw during the pandemic. But digitally rich schools were mitigating the learning loss. So you remember, you'd hear learning loss. You'd hear it all the time. You'd hear it far more when the government wanted schools to reopen, even against their own wishes in terms of health and safety. And what we began to think and this was a group of teachers that we wrote this report with, was that digital helped protect learning. And I think that's a really powerful message. Very powerful message. Also, that certainly, we've heard that today as well, certain cohorts of pupils actually enjoyed, inverted commas, I'm being cautious, but actually enjoyed remote learning. And as I said, it was a time of tragedy, but a triumph of everyday heroes. But I don't think that actually describes the full environment. It taught us what's important in our communities. As I said, on a step, with a wooden spoon, hitting a pan. But also the power of what teachers were able to do. It was, somebody said to me, and it's a bit of a cliche, it was the biggest action research program that we'd ever seen in terms of education technology adoption and use. And another theme of today is please don't return, don't sprint back to normal. Please don't sprint back to what you're used to. Get out of your comfort zones, wear a onesie, and use education technology. It also revealed the big gaps in our society. So yes, while we celebrate, we also have to acknowledge, I think, some hard truths. That school, that EdTech, as a tool for school and college improvement, has been ignored for too long. It's a tool for school and college improvement. Doesn't always work. Contexts are different. Staff capabilities are different. But when used correctly, it's a powerful, powerful tool. And England, in my view, risks being left behind. Colleagues, the conversations and policy framework in Scotland and Wales are sprinting ahead. And we need to catch up. And frankly, we've heard it today. We heard it from Paul, from Ribblesdale, we've heard it from other speakers. It makes no economic sense for an institution to carry on doing things in less efficient ways. Does make no sense. There's a few nods. But why? Well, there's one reason, is that Ofsted, English Ofsted, is missing in action. Ofsted could not hold, at this present moment, a coherent conversation about digital. Yesterday on Twitter, a teacher was complaining that when Ofsted came in to do an inspection, they said, put those Chromebooks away in that classroom. So what I'm arguing is the English system is falling behind because partly our inspectorate does not have the depth of expertise, it does not have coherent expertise across inspectors, and frankly, that also has to stop. I also believe that it's neglectful of the future. It's a powerful tool. I think today has been about inspiration. I've talked about celebration. This is where I want to be today. I want to be alongside you, celebrating who we are and what we do. I also want us to be more ambitious about the future. But this also is what today I think has been about. We've learnt things. More people have learnt things about EdTech than ever before. We've learnt that you can't ignore digital infrastructure. We can't afford to ignore it. We can't run a 21st century education system on 20th century infrastructure. Simple as that. It's great into the school office, but no speed into that classroom. We can't do it. We can't do it any longer. We also know one of the biggest challenges we've got is the retention of teachers. Some of the graphs we've seen today have been shocking. It's a workload buster. Why wouldn't you introduce systems and technology that helps you bust workload? It's one of the main reasons why people leave. And thirdly, I think we are learning that assistive technology can benefit everybody. It's not just for them over there. It's for all of us. So that kind of concept of universal learning design, yeah, we need it. And the EdTech entrepreneurs and the EdTech companies, even if you're just starting out like you are, yeah, think about assistive technology for everybody. And did we? I put it as a question. I put it as a statement initially when I wrote the PowerPoint, but I put it as a question. Did we relearn? It's clear that Fleetwood hadn't forgotten this, but did we relearn as a system that parent-school communication and involvement is key? And you should see the work in FE colleges. We can't afford to not celebrate our FE colleges. Absolutely pioneering. We've heard about apprenticeships today, we've heard about apprentices, but the work that's going in there, in places like Hull, Grimsby, yeah, FE colleges, training people virtually for jobs before they take those jobs, before they risk human beings. It's fantastic. I talked about optimism, and one of the stories in the EdTech 50 is about celebrating the optimism of EdTech, the use of EdTech, the teachers that use EdTech. But I think, and I put this out there for debate, but we need to, as people that are passionate about EdTech, we need to understand and articulate that promise. I don't think we've quite got the language yet to talk about the impact of EdTech. We've got to get better. If we're going to convince people like Ofsted, the English government, we've got to get sharper, I think, at articulating the impact. And I think that's what today's about. I think it's inspired. Let's celebrate. Let's celebrate, but also let's build hope. So this autumn, we'll be launching, I think it's the 4th year, we'll be launching an EdTech 50 to once again celebrate those people, those products, those projects out there that are shaping the EdTech landscape. We're also piloting, and it's an absolute honour to do this with LGfL, we're piloting the creation of EdTech hubs across England. West Midlands this week, Tower Hamlets a couple of weeks before, the Southwest very soon, the Northeast, the Northwest. We are going to be having EdTech hubs, essentially communities of practice, that peer-to-peer support that will unlock confidence. It will unlock people's attitudes, we hope, to EdTech. It will build an absolute, I think, an EdTech community that cannot be ignored. And you can actually buy, would you believe, T-shirts with that Dickens quote. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, yes, but but it was also the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. A season of light, a season of darkness. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. It's optimistic, don't worry. But it's realistic. Thank you very much for having me. Let's celebrate who we are.